Welcome to today's deep dive. It's into a world we rarely think about, but rely on every single day, the material world. We're using Ed Conway's book Material World as our guide to uncover the fascinating and often invisible stories behind the physical materials that shape our lives.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the world of ideas, technology, and finance. You know what Conway calls the ethereal world. But he makes this really compelling argument that this ethereal world is built on a foundation of very real, very tangible materials. And that's where our deep dive begins.
Okay, so we're going beyond apps and algorithms today and getting our hands dirty, so to speak. Conway focuses on 6 key materials: sand, salt, iron, copper, oil, and lithium. What makes these 6 so special?
Well, Conway chose these materials because they're abundant, essential to modern life, of course, and their extraction comes with both economic and environmental implications. I mean, they're all around us, often hidden in plain sight, but they're stories. Anything but ordinary.
Let's start with something we all know. Sand, I have to admit, I always thought it was an infinite resource. Beaches, deserts. Seems like there's more than enough to go around.
Right, that's a common misconception. While sand is abundant, the type of sand we need for specific purposes, like high-quality glass and concrete, is actually quite scarce. For instance, Conway points out that the UK, despite having its fair share of beaches, exports high-purity silica sand to Dubai. Turns out, desert sand isn't ideal for those applications.
Dubai importing sand. That's a real eye-opener. It challenges our assumptions about what's truly valuable in our middle world.
Exactly. It highlights the often hidden complexities of supply and demand, and how a seemingly simple material, like sand, can have global economic implications.
Speaking of surprising sources, salt is another one that I never gave much thought to, beyond seasoning my food.
Salt's importance goes far beyond the dinner table. It's crucial for industrial processes. And Conway draws this fascinating connection between ancient salt extraction methods and modern lithium production. Both rely on evaporation pools to extract valuable resources from brine, a technique that's been used for thousands of years.
So the ancient world is still informing our modern technologies in ways we might not realize. What specifically about the lithium extraction process stood out to you?
Oh, Conway paints this vivid picture of standing on the Salar de Atacama in Chile, these massive salt flats where lithium-rich brine lies just beneath the surface. He describes visualizing the vast reserves below him while using a phone, powered by that very same lithium. It's a powerful image that captures the paradox of the old world powering the new.
That's a great example of how Conway brings these concepts to life. It's not just about the science, it's about the human connection to these materials and the places they come from.
And that human connection is essential. We can't understand the material world without understanding the impact of our demand for these resources, both on the environment and on the people who extract them.
So we're talking about lithium for batteries. And that brings us to the rise of electric cars. Conway mentions that electric cars aren't actually a new invention. What happened back in the early 20th century when they were competing with steam and petrol-powered cars?
What's fascinating is that electric cars lost out back then, not because the technology was inherently bad, but because the batteries were awful. They simply couldn't hold enough charge. For long-range driving, if they had lithium-ion batteries back then, the landscape of transportation might look very different today.
So are we essentially shifting from an era of oil dependence to one of lithium dependence?
It's more nuanced than a simple swap. We're still heavily reliant on oil for a vast array of products, from plastics and fertilizers to certain medicines. However, as we electrify transportation and rely more on battery-powered devices, lithium's importance is undoubtedly increasing.
And that raises an important question about where that lithium comes from and the potential geopolitical implications of its production.
Absolutely. But before we delve into those questions, let's shift gears and explore another material that's quietly revolutionized our lives: silicon.
The heart of our digital world, silicon chips. To be honest, I've never given much thought to how they're made. It all seems like magic, these tiny, powerful components that drive our devices. What's the story there?
The journey of a silicon chip starts with quartz, a type of rock, rich in silicon. From there, it undergoes this complex, multi-stage process that involves melting, purifying, and shaping the silicon with incredible precision, using machines that operate at wavelengths smaller than visible light.
Smaller than visible light. That's incredible. How is that even possible?
It's a testament to human ingenuity. and the power of technology. They use extremely powerful lasers and complex optics to manipulate the silicon at an atomic level. It's cutting-edge science, and it's happening every day to create the billions of chips that power our digital lives.
It's mind-blowing to think about the scale of that operation and the fact that it often involves a global network of specialized manufacturers.
Exactly. One company might mine the quartz, another might refine the silicon, and yet another might etch the chips. This interconnectedness underscores the complexity of the global economy and our dependence on a delicate balance of materials and expertise.
It seems like every material we've discussed so far reveals another layer of this intricate web connecting the material world to our daily lives. It really does. It really does feel like everything is connected. And that connection brings us to another vital material, copper. It's in our wiring, our electronics, our vehicles, the backbone of our electric grid.
Yeah, copper is truly the unsung hero of electricity transmission. And as we push towards a net zero future, electrifying everything from our homes to our transportation systems, well, the demand for copper is going to skyrocket. Conway makes this startling claim we'll need to mine more copper in the next few decades than we have in all of human history.
That's a staggering amount. Where's all this copper going to come from?
That's the challenge. Conway describes visiting the Chuquicamata copper mine in Chile. It's the largest man-made hole on Earth. It's so vast, it looks like a canyon. Standing on the edge of that abyss, it gives you a sense of the sheer scale of mining required to extract these materials.
Yeah, it's a stark visual reminder of the environmental impact of our material demands.
Precisely. We can't ignore the fact that mining, even for essential materials like copper, often involves significant land disturbance, habitat loss, and the potential for pollution. It's a balancing act, trying to meet our growing needs while minimizing the environmental footprint.
It seems like there's this inherent tension between our desire for a more sustainable future and the fact that achieving that future requires us to extract vast amounts of materials from the earth.
Yeah, that's the paradox that Conway highlights throughout the book, and it's particularly relevant when we talk about the push for net zero emissions. We need massive amounts of materials to build the technologies that will get us there: electric car batteries, solar panels, wind turbines. But mining those materials, well, it has its own environmental and social costs.
So it's not just about finding alternative energy sources, it's about understanding the full life cycle of the materials that make those alternatives possible.
Exactly, and it's also about recognizing the geopolitical implications. Take lithium, for example. Right now, China dominates the lithium-ion battery market. As we electrify our transportation systems, we could become increasingly reliant on a single country for a critical resource.
So we're potentially trading one form of dependence for another. That raises concerns about supply chain vulnerabilities and potential economic or political leverage.
It's a reminder that the material world is not separate from the geopolitical landscape. These materials are intertwined with global power dynamics, trade relationships, and national security concerns.
It makes you realize that the choices we make about the materials we use have implications that extend far beyond our individual lives. They impact entire countries and the global economy. Conway also uses the example of asbestos to highlight the complexities of the material world. It's a material we know is incredibly dangerous.
And yet, we're still mining millions of tons of asbestos every year, globally, more, in fact, than lithium and cobalt combined. It's a stark illustration of how economic needs, cultural factors, and even a lack of awareness can outweigh known health and environmental risks.
It challenges our assumptions about how decisions are made and highlights the importance of understanding the full picture, the benefits, the risks, the trade-offs, and the unintended consequences.
You know, Conway's point is not to instill fear or guilt, but rather to encourage a more informed and nuanced conversation about our relationship with the material world. He wants us to ask questions, to be aware of the hidden lives of these materials, and to recognize the power we have as consumers and citizens to shape a more sustainable future.
Like he's encouraging us to become more conscious consumers, to think critically about where things come from, and to make choices that align with our values.
And to do that, we need to shed light on the often invisible processes that bring these materials into our lives, from the VAM mines to the intricate manufacturing facilities There's a whole world operating behind the scenes that we rarely see or think about.
Like he's pulling back the curtain and revealing the wizardry behind our modern world, showing us the raw materials, the energy, the human labor, and the environmental impact that go into creating the things we use every day.
And by understanding those processes, by acknowledging the trade-offs and complexities, we can start to make more informed decisions, both individually and collectively. We can advocate for more responsible sourcing, push for technological innovations that reduce our reliance on certain materials, and support policies that prioritize sustainability and ethical practices.
Yeah, it's a call to action, to become more aware, more engaged, and more responsible. In our relationship with the material world, what particularly struck me was Conway's concluding point. He asks, if we're so often blind to the hidden life of materials, how can we truly understand the world we live in and shape the world we want to create?
That question really lingers, doesn't it? Yeah, it challenges us to look beyond the surface, beyond the sleek design of our devices, and the convenience of our modern lives, to see the interconnectedness of everything. Our choices as individuals and as a society have ripple effects that extend far beyond what we might immediately perceive.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the abstract, reducing emissions, transitioning to renewable energy. But Conway reminds us that those goals have material consequences. They require us to extract resources, to manufacture products, to transport goods, all of which have an impact on the planet and its people.
He's not advocating for us to abandon technology or to return to some idealized pre-industrial past. Instead, he's urging us to develop a more sophisticated understanding of our relationship with the material world, one that acknowledges both the benefits and the costs, the opportunities and the challenges.
Right. It's about recognizing that there are no easy answers, no simple solutions. It's about embracing complexity, asking tough questions, and being willing to make informed choices, even when those choices involve trade-offs.
And it's about recognizing the power we have as consumers and citizens. To influence change, we can demand a greater transparency from companies, support policies that promote sustainable practices, and invest in innovations that reduce our environmental footprint.
It starts with awareness. The next time you pick up your phone, drive your car, or walk into a building, take a moment to consider the materials that made it possible. The sand, the salt, the copper, the lithium, the oil, they all have a story to tell.
Think about the people who mined those materials, the energy consumed to process them, the intricate global supply chains that brought them together. Is a humbling realization that our modern world is built on the backs of countless individuals and the resources of our planet.
It's not about guilt or shame, but rather about empowerment. By understanding the material world, by seeing the connections between our actions and their consequences, we can start to make more conscious choices.
We can become advocates for a more sustainable future, one where we balance our material needs with our responsibility to protect the planet for generations to come.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning about the hidden world of materials all around us.
It's a journey full of fascinating discoveries and the potential to shape a future where we live in greater harmony with the material world among which we all depend.